I started it.
Oh, okay. The fruits of the Spirit are 9 attributes that a person living for Christ embodies. They are love, joy, peace, long-suffering, also known as patience, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, and temperance. To the main character, Christopher Gardner, he embodies many of these attributes and sometimes fails to. First attribute that I'll be discussing is the fruit of joy. There are times that Christopher does and doesn't show joy. For example, he can get very angry at times, even though it is understandable why. For example, when one of his scanners gets stolen, twice. He also gets very angry when he fights with his wife and his friend over money. There are times he does show joy. One of these would be with his son. He's almost always happy when he's with his son. Christopher, even in the worst conditions. For example, they had to sleep on the bathroom floor in the subway station because they had nowhere else to go. Christopher Sr. made this as good as he could for his son and even distracted him by pretending they were in the Jurassic era and that they had to hide from the dinosaurs. This is also a great example of love. Another time where Christopher shows joy is when he seems so happy to be taking Christopher Jr. to the beach. He also seems to be very at peace in this time. One final example of how Christopher Gardner shows joy is that he is extremely joyful when he gets the stockbroker job after his grueling internship. Another fruit of the Spirit is gentleness. Christopher is gentle in fights with his wife, for the most part, and he remains calm and collected. He very rarely yells at his wife, even when she left him and their son. One time he's not gentle is when he gets kicked out of the hotel for failure to pay rent. He is very harsh and yells at his son when he asks questions and is sad rather than being understanding. The next example is love. Christopher shows love in everything he does for his family. He makes so many sacrifices for them and wants the best for them. When his wife left, he continued to show his love for his son. Another example of Christopher showing love is spending his life saving on the scanners to make more money for his family and provide them with a better life. Another example of love is when he sacrificed so much to keep his son safe. He even donated his own blood to get some extra money since they were close to being broke. He then spent some of this money on a treat for his son, even though money was tight. He just wanted his son to be happy. Another fruit of the Spirit is goodness. Christopher shows goodness in doing so many favors for his boss and advisor in the internship, even when it is extremely inconvenient for him. For example, Christopher was already running late for a meeting with the CEO of a big company and then he had to move his advisor's car, which he had to park illegally and got a parking ticket for, which he paid for. Christopher does not show goodness when he runs from a cab driver when he couldn't pay the toll for the ride. He chose to run when he realized he couldn't pay, even though it was his choice to get in the cab in the first place. He wasn't honest, and he stole from the cab driver. Another fruit that Christopher embodies is patience. Christopher is patient when he is trying to sell all of his bone density scanners because he knows it's for a good cause, supporting his family. He is patient in trying to find a new job in the stockbroker place, and he doesn't give up. He finds ways to get himself into a place to succeed. For example, when he met his boss at his job and rode the taxi with him just to get more opportunities to talk to him. Another example of patience that Christopher shows is remaining patient through the entirety of his internship, even though he was going through so much. It seems important to him that church and God... Oh, sorry. I lost my spot. He remained patient through the entirety of the internship, running crazy errands and sacrificing his sales calls for his advisor. He worked so hard even though he didn't have as many hours to work as the other interns did. It paid off and he got the job. One final attribute that Christopher shows is faith. Christopher still manages to make it to church one day even though he was going through so much. It seems important to him that church and God still be a part of his and his son's life. Bad thing after bad thing happens to Christopher and his son, but he doesn't leave his son. He remains faithful to them even when times are tough. One final way that Christopher shows faith is in prayer. There are numerous times where Chris appears to be praying, even though no words are spoken. For example, before his interview, when he was wearing bad clothes and covered in paint, and when he fixed his last scanner, which was his son's last hope for getting more money to survive. Overall, Chris shows many of the fruits of the Spirit, but like everyone else on earth, he isn't perfect. Sometimes he slips up, but in the end he always manages to show love, patience, goodness, faith, gentleness, and joy for his son, God, and the other people in his life.